Friends, welcome to these unique weekly chapels that we're doing during this summer at High Point University. We're talking about the power of story. When I think about someone who can tell a story well, I think about our guest this evening, Jeri Rowe. Jeri Rowe is a senior writer here at High Point University and has been a reporter, editor, and columnist for a quarter of a century before he came to High Point University, though he looks like he's probably only about 35 years old.
Yeah, thanks.
Jeri's also a good friend of mine and helps me become a better pastor. And here's why. Many of us think about Jeri as a writer and a storyteller primarily. That's not what he is primarily. He's someone who knows how to listen to other people's stories. He can tell people's stories because he's listened to them well. And this is a lost art. And it's something we need to rediscover if we're going to learn how to belong to one another again. Jeri knows how to listen. And so today we're going to be having a conversation about what listening well means in the practice of journalism, and what are the spiritual components of listening well. So Jeri Rowe, welcome to Weekly Chapel.
Preston, good to see you.
Before I ask you how you tell a good story, I want to come to that building block component. What do you do before you tell someone's story?
Well, you got to know their story. You got to know when it's what makes them tick and what's going on going into it. Usually stories you have these two forms really. They either people overcoming an obstacle, or they're on a quest. And then you kind of go in there knowing that story. And then when you meet with them, it's all depending how you meet with them. It's all about body language. And as I've mentioned to you, I like to sit beneath them. There are some times when I would do really tough, difficult stories about life and death. I would go where people feel comfortable, usually their kitchen or their living room or their den, and I would sit on the floor. And I'd sit on the floor, and they'd ask me, like, do you want to sit up? It's like, no, I'm okay. Because it's not intimidating. Where I sit eye level or whatever, I sit below them. Because I know that we're going to go some, I always tell them this, is I would say, listen, we're going to go to some tough places, some dark places, but we're going to go there together. And then we begin.
Your posture allows them to go there. It's a very Jesus-like move. I'm thinking of scripture from like Philippians of one. No, you may not think of yourself that way, but the disposition is such, it's humbling oneself before the other so that they know that you're there for them.
Humble's
I'm not over top of you. I'm here for you.
Right, and that's key. You're here for them, and the key word here is it needs to be humbling, because it ain't about you. It's about their story. And the best compliment you could ever get was when they pick up the paper. You don't want them to go, "Oh my gosh." You want them to go, "Yeah, that's my story. That's it. That's it."
Oh,
that's what
so lovely.
That's what you wanted them to get.
I think of Philippians 2 about the one who was equal with God, who came in the form of a human and lowered himself. The text says, lowered himself. You do a similar kind of move. You lower yourself. It's lovely.
I think that's important.
The way you do that too, it brings me back to the greatest commandment that Jesus talks about. It goes one ear and out the other of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Or he says, and then the second is like the first, which is to love your neighbor as yourself, where some have translated actually the way you love your neighbor is actually the way you love God.
Mm.
So the way you actually listen to your neighbor, who is anyone, is actually the way you might listen to God. So the way that you actually practice lowering yourself and being present to someone else, it's a sacred move.
Mm.
You can't say anything in response to that, but what I would want our students or others in the community is to see is the beauty of that kind of move. It says, I'm here and this is your time.
Because when you're talking to folks, when you're listening, I think two key things need to happen. You need to connect. And then the second thing is you need to be present with them. Presence. You need it's absolute presence, and that's what you kind of need to kind of zero in on.
So let's go this farther. What does it mean to listen well? Lowering yourself, being present with someone. Keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting when I talk to journalism classes, whether at High Point University or other universities in North Carolina. I always play this video from or this audio from Brandon Stanton. Brandon Stanton is basically created the Humans of New York, which he basically does these multimedia presentations with people he meets on the street. And in this audio, he's talking to Tim Ferriss, the Uber podcaster, and he basically talks about how he connects with 10,000 people he's interviewed, and he basically just asked 3 questions. What's your biggest struggle? How has your life turned out differently than you expected? And what are you most guilty of? And what it does, it's not an interview. He talks about starting a conversation with people. As for me, as I also tell students, is that the 2 most important questions you can ask are, what happens next? And why do you say that? What happens next establishes chronology. It's a plot. What you're looking for is structure. Then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. That's how we understand how we read and talk. That's how we understand. The real important question is, why do you say that? Because people talk in platitudes, and what you're looking for are details, telling details that make a story sing. And it's almost like pulling a string. And then you dive deep, and what you're looking for are details that are authentic, that you can feel, that you can see, that you can hear, because that's how you report with your senses. You write with your senses. And that's how you dig into those details that make a story, in my mind, that make it really work. That's how you get presence. That's how you get connection.
And did you say that I'm not even sure if you said the second question, was it the second question is, why do you say that?
Right. Why do you say that? What does it all mean? Why do you say that? Like, oh, I had a wonderful childhood. I had a bad childhood. I love that city. Why do you say that? Or for example, when I interview students here, I really enjoyed coming to High Point. It's a beautiful campus, but I really connected with the professors. I think the professors are wonderful. But why do you say that? And then you get details of particular names, particular classes, particular scenes. Because what you do is then you start writing in scenes. Then you kind of create that, whether it be a class or a professor or a connection or something in their life that really resonates. Really resonates.
So as a pastor, what I'm hearing you actually say is reporting as hospitality.
Yeah.
From the posture, from the questions you ask, it's not just what you ask, it's how you ask.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating an environment in which one feels ennobled or empowered to be honest and vulnerable with you so that they can be heard.
I hope so.
Henry Nouwen, who's a spiritual writer we often go to help make meaning of this, he writes on a book called Reaching Out about hospitality, and he says, a good host is one who believes that his or her guest is carrying a promise he wants to reveal to anyone who shows genuine interest.
Those are 2 key words: genuine interest. You got to be authentic about it. It's all about this whole idea. To be an interesting person, you've got to be interested. That's where it gets in that interest. Yeah.
The most interesting people are interested people.
Right. Exactly.
I just see so many overlaps here. The way you show up to people is actually how you do something is how you do anything. And so for me, it's a posture of prayer. Like if you have practices of being someone who doesn't speak at God, but tries to listen, has a deep kind of wants to be present to God, it actually might help you be present to other people. The way I might translate this is you're not looking for something transactional from God. You're looking for something, what's the word? I'm not trying to earn something from God. I'm trying to be empathetic to this God who is about love, compassion, justice. and being more present to those things. And in being present to those things, I might be more present to God's creation or God's people.
I find it interesting what you said, that you love thy neighbor as thyself is also how you love God, which I find really interesting. It's also that whole idea of that hospitality. It's a really interesting thought about that whole idea, I think.
You've heard thousands, if not millions, of people's stories over these 25, 30 years you've been listening. Are there some that stick with you that have been where you've had God kind of break through?
Preston, there's so many. As you know, well now, I'm a faith guy. And there are times when I've got an angel on my shoulder, or God is nudging me. And I'll tell one. There are many, but I'll tell one. This happened in December of 2011. I was a columnist for the News and Record in Greensboro, and a photographer I work with had mentioned he'd been following this homeless guy for about a year. And my photographer friend, his first name is Jeri. I call him Jelly because we had too many Jerrys in the newsroom, like me. And Jelly told me, he said, I don't know where I'm going to go with this story. I've been following this guy. I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, tell me about him. Well, it's coming up on Christmas. Remember, it's December. It's coming up on Christmas, and all he's got is a snow globe. I was like, there's your story right there. All he's got for Christmas is a snow globe. Jelly, where does he live? So I went down the block. He lived right near Bennett College, right off the railroad tracks. And I went to go meet him 3 times. I talked to him about his life, about what I could get from it, about how he had created his whole camp out of discarded signs and tarps. And told me his name was Toddy. Well, I wrote that story Christmas Day. A couple of weeks later, I get the phone's ringing, and as a columnist, I wrote 3 times a week. And I'm always not in the office. I'm always going. I was out the door, had my pad in my hand, and my phone was ringing. Something told me to pick up that phone. Who told me that? That's the rhetorical question. Well, I pick up the phone, and it's a man on the other end. And he said, Mr. Rowe, I'd like to talk to you about the man you wrote last week about who was in the woods. I wanted to talk to you about Toady. I was like, sir, his name is Toddy. He told me his name is Toddy. No, sir, his name is Toady. I think he told me his name was Toddy. And the man responded, no, Mr. Rowe, his name is Toady, and that's my brother. They've been searching for him for a decade. They thought he was dead. And one of the cousins who worked at the hospital, he was the emergency room director at the hospital in Greensboro, checked the morgue every month to see if he was there. Well, they found him after a decade. He was a long-distance trucker who just vanished. Well, they connected. That was the other story I wrote. Well, then the cousin who worked at the hospital called me back and was frustrated. This was a month after that. So you say this like February or maybe March. And they were trying to get Toady disability. Well, he was getting denied and denied. And he just called a vent. And I told his name was Ron. I said, Ron, why don't we do another story? How about this? You make Toady the face of the disability system here in North Carolina and what needs to be fixed. I said, but I need to talk to some folks. And they were at their wits' end because they're all working class folks, middle class folks. They were afraid they had to go to work, and Toady was at their house, and he went from house to house, and they're afraid he's going to walk off and they're going to lose him again. That's what it was. So I wrote the piece. I wrote another column. And here's where God comes into it. And I told Ron, I said, you never know what readers will do. I said, but you tell your story authentically, they may reach out to help. And they may reach out to help you financially establish a bank account. So they did. Well, here's what happened. It was 10 different readers, strangers, sent checks anywhere from $50 to $1,000, $50 to $1,000, and they received $2,800. Well, that $2,800 kept put Toady into a group home, funded it until he could get disability. Then he got disability the third time. That $2,800 was basically just a saving grace for Toady's family. And he was able to get disability and stay in a group home in a safe setting, get on his medication because he had schizophrenia, and he was going to be okay. And I remember going to the reunion. He was from Rockingham County, went to Reedsville, and it was after all was said and done. And I sat right beside Toady, and he looked at me and goes, "I know you. I ran away from you at the railroad tracks." And we just talked about it. But yeah, I mean, I say that is an instance of, the power of storytelling, the power that could move people. And then it's that what Richard Rohr calls that liminal space. That liminal space, that's something you can't see, but you can sense it. You can feel it. And something's moving you to do something.
There's this hum inside you moving you toward other people.
Exactly. It's what I call a God thing. It's a God thing.
That's why I would say it's so important for our community and those who are tuning in for these things is the listen isn't simply outward, it's definitely inward. You get this practice or posture of prayer, which isn't just talking at God. It's maybe deep silence of listening and listening to that hum that's within you, that's moving you toward other people, to be a healing presence, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The thing that's framed this conversation for me with you, it's from Hebrews 13, which is, let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. I think we're constantly entertaining angels, whether we know it or not. Hey, Jeri, thanks for your time today. I hope this has been helpful for others. It's been helpful for me. Thank you.
Preston, I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much. Appreciate this opportunity.
Peace, my friend.
Peace.